My mother's name is Shefali Kandar Modi. She is the daughter of Naveen and Shashi Kandar. Shefali was born in the bustling city of Mumbai, India on October 30th, 1969. She lived in India with her parents till 1971 when her younger brother Apush was born. In 1972, my grandparents decided to move from Mumbai, India to Sydney, Australia. The Australian government encouraged more people to come to Australia. Many countries made agreements over immigration. The Australian government paid some countries to have people migrate. One of these countries was India. Immigrants' entry was now based on what they can contribute to Australia and if it could be shown that they could integrate into the Australian society. This attracted many professionals and highly qualified people. My grandparents received a huge sum of money to move to Australia to practice their medicine, so my mom at the age of 1.5 and the rest of her family migrated to Sydney, Australia. Growing up, my mom attended an all-girls Roman Catholic school in Sydney. At school, she was taught by nuns. Her school highly emphasized the works of the nuns and missionary Mother Teresa. My mom always looked up to her and admired Mother Teresa. She was my mother's role model. My mom was always inspired by Mother Teresa's charitable heart and her compassion for others. At the age of 8, my mother actually had the chance to meet Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa told my mom one of her famous quotes, "Spread love everywhere you go. Let no one ever come to you without leaving happier. Remember to be faithful in small things, because it is in them that your strength lies." To this day, my mother lives by those words. Mother Teresa died on September 5, 1997, at the age of 87, after several years of deteriorating health in which she suffered from heart, lung, and kidney problems. Mother Teresa was the founder of the Order of Missionaries of Charity, a Roman Catholic congregation of women dedicated to helping the poor. She was considered one of the greatest humanitarians of the 20th century. She is an amazing inspiration to people all over the world. Even after her death, her legacy still carries on to this day. Orphanages, schools, and shelters have been placed in honor of her selfless acts. Her death impacted many Roman Catholics around the world. When Mother Teresa died, my mother vowed to always do one charitable project a year. During my mom's schooling years, she had to wear a uniform and travel by bus, train, and a second bus to get to her school, because as the Australians say, she lived out in the boonies. My mom met her 2 best friends, both named Maria, on the bus to school. They have stayed best friends till today. In 1987, the first of the 4 Fiji coups were happening. The Fiji coups of 1987 resulted in the overthrow of the elected government of the Fijian Prime Minister. Both before and after Fiji gained its independence from the United Kingdom in 1970, tensions between the indigenous Fijian and Indo-Fijian ethnic groups continually involved themselves in social and political unrest. Australia and New Zealand were somewhat unsettled by the event, but ultimately took no action to intervene. They did, however, establish a policy of non-recognition regarding the new government. They decided to provide refuge to refugees escaping the new government. Because of this, the Fiji coup resulted in an influx of Fijian refugees in Australia. Many Fijians immersed themselves in the Australian community. My mom faced a lot of racism directed towards her. They rejected the Indian ethnicity due to their problems with the Indo-Fijian population back at home. My mom would be scared to go on the bus to school due to all the new members of the community. The racism my mom faced taught her to ignore what people's opinions of her were. Today, my mom is a strong-headed woman because of this. When my mom finished university at 22, her parents decided that my mom was ready for marriage. My grandparents took the traditional route and opted to have their daughter have an arranged marriage. My grandparents took my mom on a tour of India in 1992. On this trip, my mom met my dad Hiran. They were both to be arranged the following December. My mom got to know my dad over the year-long engagement through the long distance. On December 26, 1993, my parents got married. Since my dad lived in the U.S., my mother had to move from Sydney to California. The Immigration Act that was passed in 1990 proved to be a hindrance to my mom. The Immigration Act of 1990 was signed into law by George H.W. Bush on November 29, 1990. It was a national reform of the Immigration Nationality Act of 1965. It increased total overall immigration to the U.S. per year for the next 4 years. It provided based family immigration visa that created 5 distinct employment-based visas, categorized by occupation as well as diversity. There were also cutbacks in the allotment of visas available for extended relatives. New citizens also had to go through a more lengthy process to be able to apply for a passport. My mom was allotted a family immigration visa after 1 year of applying. She was then able to finally move to the States with my dad, who had been living here since 1987. Because of the act, my mom had to go through a lengthy application process to become a citizen. She was told that she had to stay in the States for 7 years before she could travel in order to get her United States citizenship. My mom got depressed in this time because she could not travel back home to Australia to visit her family or attend her best friend's weddings. After her long wait, my mom received her citizenship. Till today, she has a double citizenship to the United States and Australia, and so do I. 7 years later, my mom gave birth to Anjali and I, my twin. In the early 2000s, there was the United States housing bubble that was a real estate bubble affecting over half the United States. Housing prices began to peak around 1999 after the dot-com crash. Because of the housing bubble, my mom was able to switch her careers. She always wanted to be a real estate agent, but she never knew if she could earn enough. The booming industry proved to my mom that she could. On September 11, 2001, a group of Al-Qaeda Islamic extremists hijacked 4 planes. These planes carried out suicide attacks against targets in the United States. The attacks resulted in extensive death and destruction, triggering the U.S. to combat terrorism. To this day, 9/11 is remembered throughout the U.S. as a day of loss and bravery for this country. It was a catastrophic event for everyone. My mother was devastated, as everyone else around the nation was too. The day after 9/11, however, cops showed up to my parents' house interrogating them about how long they've lived in the USA. My mother told me that was one of the most scariest moments of her life. That very day, my mom went out and bought an American flag to put up in front of our house. This incident led my mom to show her patriotism and love for this country. My mother is no longer afraid, but she is proud to be a part of this nation. A few years later, around the late 2000s, came the Great Recession. The Great Recession is a term that represents the sharp decline in economic activity during the late 2000s, which is generally considered the largest economic event since the Great Depression. The term Great Recession applies to both U.S. recession officially lasting from December 2007 to June 2009, and the global recession in 2009. The economic decline began when the U.S. housing market went from boom to bust. The causes for this event include high interest rates, the stock market crash, falling house prices and sales, a slowdown in manufacturing orders, bank failures, and many more causes. The Great Recession was a tough time in my family. When the economy declined, my dad's business of party and event planning failed. During hard times, many people do not care to spend money on parties. This is exactly what happened in 2010. My parents were forced to close my dad's business. In this process, my parents lost a lot of money. My mom and dad had to work extra hard to get back on their feet. Because of the determination for a good life, my parents worked their hardest to recover their money. 4 years later, our family was able to move into my parents' dream home. Today, my mom says her story is still unfinished. Thank you.